Welcome back to Success with Steven. My name is Steven Smith. On this channel, we discuss all things financial literacy. In today's video, I want to break down a real funding strategy that helped me get $111,000 in 0% APR business credit using an LLC that was basically dead. And when I say a dead LLC, I mean that this was not a business producing major revenue or showing strong deposits or operating with years of banking history. This was an LLC that I originally created for my Amazon FBA business. Normally every year I would use Black Friday deals to buy inventory for retail arbitrage. I actually made an entire video series showing you how this strategy helped me make around $30,000 in about 3 months. But outside of that, this LLC was not very active. It had been mostly sitting around, and at one point, it had even fallen inactive with the Secretary of State. In the past few months, I decided to restructure some of my current debt, borrow money at a cheaper rate, and position myself for brand new 0% APR business funding. To do that, I cleaned up the business structure, I brought this LLC back active, I opened the right business banking relationships, I moved money into the accounts, and then I applied for several business funding products. So by the end of this funding sequence, I was able to get $111,000 in 0% APR business credit, and if you count the personal loan that I used, it was actually around $141,000. The reason I want to break this down is because a lot of people think business credit is random, or that having an 800 credit score automatically means that you'll get approved, but that is not how this works at all. The bank you apply with matters a lot. The order you apply in, that also matters. Your personal credit profile matters, and your relationship with the bank does matter a lot. Even how you handle a pending application can be the difference between getting approved and getting denied. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened. I'll show you why I used this older LLC instead of starting a brand new one, why I opened and funded new accounts at Chase, US Bank, and Bank of America, and how Chase almost approved me for almost $50,000 by itself. And without further ado, let's break down this funding sequence step by step. Now, before you start any funding sequence, the first thing you should do, and the first thing that I always like to do, is get a full picture of where I'm at. Before you apply for any type of funding, no matter what you're doing, you always have to understand exactly what's on your personal credit profile and what that looks like. Now, my first recommendation will be annualcreditreport.com. Annualcreditreport.com is the only source authorized by federal law to provide you with all 3 of your credit reports for free. At the time of recording this video, you can pull your report once per week, and this is where I would start if you want to see the raw data that the bureaus are reporting. My second recommendation is rising.com, but this one is really for a specific type of person. Now, Rising is an all-in-one credit repair platform that gives you access to your credit reports and your scores, but it also shows you what may be hurting your credit. It helps you also take action with tools like dispute templates and bureau response tracking. If you have any derogatory accounts like collections, charge-offs, late payments, or any inaccurate or negative information, I would use Rising as your 90-day credit repair improvement system. And if your credit profile is thin or lacking age, then Rising also includes up to 24 months of rental utility trade lines that can back report positive payment history. That can help you add on-time payments and up to 2 years of account age to your credit profile. So if you need help with credit repair, or you simply have a thin credit file, then Rising is something I would recommend that you look into. Right now, you can access Rising with the $1 7-day trial. The link will be in the description. There will also be a clickable link option on the screen. Now, in my case, from a personal credit standpoint, I knew my profile looked strong. But like I always say, the credit score doesn't matter as much as the credit profile does. When I looked at my report, I had a lot of unsecured debt in the form of personal loans. Now, I originally used those loans for a business investment, but when I compare the APRs to what was available right now, those older loans were way too expensive. So the first thing I did was focus on paying those off and restructuring the debt at a cheaper rate. I already had multiple credit cards reporting, and almost all of my credit card limits are over $20,000. That matters because I had comparable credit lines to the amount of funding that I was trying to get approved for. On top of that, I had other installment accounts reporting, including 2 auto loans. So from the bank's perspective, I was not someone with a thin credit profile. I had revolving credit, installment credit accounts, high limit credit cards, and decent credit history. My credit history is also around 3 years old, but for most people watching this, 2 years of solid credit history can be enough. And as you can see on screen, I put my personal credit data points. This is where I was at. And then I also put the general credit requirements on the right-hand side where I believe you should be to get approved for the same thing or similar limits. I also only had 3 hard inquiries and all of them were older than 6 months, which helped me keep my profile clean before applying. So after reviewing my personal credit, the next step was to look at the business entity itself. Now, originally, I thought about just starting a brand new LLC. And to be clear, you can get a brand new LLC and you can get business credit. That is definitely possible. In some cases, I actually prefer starting fresh because it makes the business easier to structure properly from the beginning. But just because you can get approved doesn't mean you're going to get the highest possible limits. When you apply with a very young business, your approval limits may be a little bit lower. You can still get approved, but instead of getting $25,000, you may only get $5,000 or $10,000. And when your goal is to maximize an entire funding sequence, that difference does matter. So in this particular case, I just wanted to position myself for the highest possible limits. Now, this part is not gospel, so please don't get stuck on this. You don't need a 3-year-old LLC to get approved for business credit. But if you have the option of applying with a 2-month-old LLC or a 3-year-old one, the older entity can sometimes help position you, especially if everything else is structured correctly. But that last part is very important. If your older LLC is not structured properly, when you go to fill out your business application or you go to fill out, for your credit card, lines of credit, whatever, and the information is mismatched, it can be very hard for you to get approved. So again, take that with a grain of salt. If your only option is to start new, that is completely fine. Now, the only problem that I really had with this business is that I had not been in business anymore. My business license had lapsed with the Secretary of State. And because of that, I had not kept up with the required filing or the annual fees. But the age of this entity was still there. So once I saw that, I knew my next step was to bring this LLC back into good standing and clean up the business structure a little bit before applying for funding. To get my LLC back in good standing, I contacted the Secretary of State here in Nevada. Now, for everyone watching this process, it's going to look different depending on your state. So make sure you follow the requirements where your business is registered. For me, the process was pretty straightforward. I was able to complete this in 3 steps. First, I had to file a reinstatement packet through the state's official portal and pay all outstanding fees, penalties, and back taxes. Now, the state calculated the exact amount owed, which included the reinstatement fee, the missed annual list filings, the business license fee, and some late penalties. Secondly, I also had to make sure that my registered agent information was up to date. So if your registered agent has changed or if they need to accept the appointment once again, that may be included as part of your reinstatement requirements. And third, from there, I completed the required forms. I included the application for reinstatement, the list of officers, managers, or members, and I signed the declaration page. And once everything was submitted through Silver Flume and the payment was made, the LLC was reinstated and processed retroactively. Now, in total, this cost me around $1,350, but once the LLC was active again, the entire funding strategy was already moving in the right direction. Now, I want to be clear. I am not telling you to do this. I am definitely not telling you to go buy like a shelf corporation or anything like that. I have never done that. Personally, I think it's a waste of money. But if you're going to use an existing LLC or you're going to be added to one, you need to make sure that the ownership information is documented properly. You also want to make sure that that business is in good standing and the entire structure is set up correctly before you start applying for funding, because if it's not, that can really hurt your chances of approval, mostly because of verification issues. Once the LLC was active again, the next part of the strategy was building the bank relationships before applying. Now, one of the most important steps when going after 0% APR business credit cards is opening a business checking account and a business savings account at the bank that you plan on applying for and keeping money in those accounts before submitting your applications. For this strategy, the 3 banks that I wanted to focus on were Chase, Bank of America, and US Bank. Now, the plan was simple. I opened the business checking and savings accounts with all three banks. I deposited money into those accounts. I let the funds sit there for a short period of time, and then I applied for business credit cards. In this case, I let the money sit for about 90 days. For me, ideally, I like to see at least $10,000 or more placed into each account. Now, is $10,000 a magic number? No. Does it guarantee any approvals? No, but it does help with your internal banking profile when the bank sees that you're not just opening empty bank accounts and immediately asking for lines of credit. So in this case, it absolutely would help. Banks are driven by behavior and they're driven by relationships. They want deposits, they want activity, and they want to see that you're bringing value to their institutions. So when you open a business account and you place $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 or more than that into an account, it can help you look more serious from the bank's perspective. Now, in my situation, I had the funds sitting in my Navy Federal account. I could have just moved them there. But remember, part of this strategy was also about me paying down unsecured debt so that I could later access capital at a cheaper rate. Recently, I updated two videos, my Navy Federal personal loan video and also my Lightstream video, where I talked about how I actually paid down both loans and I got new loans at a lower rate. If you guys want to watch that, I'll link those videos here. So instead of me just moving money around after paying off one of my largest personal loans, I took out another loan at a lower rate to access more capital more efficiently. Now, this is where Lightstream came into the picture. Now, Lightstream is one of my favorite personal loans to access capital. Now, the reason why I like Lightstream so much is because, based on my experience, they give a lot of money to first-time borrowers or people with thinner credit profiles. It's also a no-doc loan option, and I was able to get access to $30,000 within around 24 hours, and then I use those funds strategically as part of my overall funding plan. An additional benefit is that this loan may take 45 to 60 days before it reports to your personal credit, which can give you a short window to use those funds before the new debt shows up. So if you want to learn more about the Lightstream loan and the data points to get approved, then I do have that full video once again where I walk you through the step-by-step process. I do highly recommend that you watch that video after this one. Now, I want to be very clear. The Lightstream loan itself, that was not 0% APR. That was not. It was a personal loan. But it still played an important role in this strategy because it gave me the liquidity that I needed to seed my business bank accounts. And I split those funds between Chase, US Bank, and Bank of America. Once again, you do not want to open a business account, deposit money, and apply for credit cards 5 minutes later. That looks very rushed and it doesn't give the banking relationship any time to settle. Now, if you are in a rush, I would say at least wait 13 to 14 days before applying for any business credit cards. But ideally, you want to give the account more time. You want to allow those funds to sit and you want to let that relationship look more established. Now, once my 90 days were over, the first bank I went to was Chase. The first card I applied for was the Chase Inc. Business Unlimited. Now, for this application, I decided to apply online. Personally, when it makes sense, I like to apply online with Chase because it's quicker and it's more efficient. Now, a relationship manager can be helpful in certain situations, but when your credit profile is strong, an online application can move very quickly. So I submitted the Chase Inc. Business Unlimited application online and then it went into a pending status. Now, this was not a problem because the same thing happened before with me with my first Chase credit card. In that situation, it was just an identity verification issue. And I actually have a full video called The Ultimate Guide to Chase Business Credit Cards where I explain exactly what to do if your Chase application goes into a pending status. So I would watch that video if you want a deeper breakdown. After verifying the information, I was approved for $25,000 on the Chase Inc. Business Unlimited credit card. Now, once that approval came through, it gave me the green light to go after another Chase business credit card immediately. So the next card that I applied for was the Chase Inc. Business Cash Card. Now, when you apply for a second card back to back, you need to make sure the information on the second application will match the first one. If you have to take a screenshot or write it down, then do that. Do not create unnecessary inconsistencies. You want to use the exact same data points unless there is a legitimate reason why something had to be different at that time. So again, I applied online for the Chase Inc. Business Cash Card using the exact same information from the first application. That application also went into a pending status. Again, most people now would have just waited, but I did not do that. I called Chase and it ended up being the exact same issue. There was an address verification concern, so I went ahead and confirmed the information verbally. I reviewed it all with the representative using the exact same information that was on my application, and I was approved. Now, this time I was approved for $20,000. So just between two Chase business credit cards, I had $45,000 in 0% business credit. And that is why this strategy is so powerful when it's done correctly. Sometimes the difference between an approval and a denial is simply making the right phone call. Now, for both of these credit cards, Experian was pulled. Now, if you guys have any questions about hard inquiries, then you know I have an entire video that shows you how to remove hard inquiries using rising.com. So if you want to remove your business inquiries, you can. Next up, I applied for my credit cards with US Bank. When applying with US Bank, I usually prefer working with a business relationship manager. US Bank is one of those places where the right relationship manager can make the process smoother, especially if you already have multiple products with them. But for this strategy, I decided to complete the application online. Now, the US Bank strategy was to apply for two business credit cards back to back. The two cards that I focused on were the US Bank Triple Cash Rewards card and the US Bank Business Shield Visa card. The process was the same as Chase. Apply for the first card, wait for that decision, and if the first card is approved, then move forward with the second card immediately. Now, the reason why this can work is because in some cases, both applications may be reviewed around the same time, and the second approval may come close to the first approval limit. But here's the important rule. If the first application is denied, do not apply for the second card. But if the first card is approved, then you can move forward with the second application right away. So I applied for the US Bank Triple Cash Rewards card first, and that was approved with a $15,000 limit. Was that terrible? No, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. And I believe that limit came back lower because I had recently received another approval from a US Bank product not long before this application. In my experience, banks can sometimes factor in recent approvals when deciding on how much additional credit they want to extend to you. Now, after the triple cash approval, I applied for the US Bank Business Shield Visa, and that card was approved for $8,000. Now, could that limit have been higher? Absolutely. But overall, I was satisfied with the outcome because I had both US Bank cards and they added an additional $23,000 in business credit, so that was good enough for this funding sequence. And finally, we moved on to Bank of America. Now, one of the reasons Bank of America can be useful in the funding sequence is that you can apply online and potentially get multiple business credit card approvals from one hard inquiry. In some cases, you may be able to get two cards from, again, that same inquiry. Now, Bank of America has a completely different strategy, and I will probably break this down in a separate video because there are some ways to position yourself to get better limits with them. But for this round, I didn't want to spend another month building out a deeper Bank of America strategy. I wanted to keep moving forward with my sequence. So I did take the remaining $20,000 that I had available and I added it to the funds that were already in the account. So that way I put the full $30,000 into Bank of America for an additional 2 weeks before I applied. And the only reason that I really waited the 2 weeks was because I waited for the hard inquiry to come off from TransUnion before I wanted to apply for these credit cards. So I just let the money sit. Now, the first Bank of America card that I applied for was the Business Advantage Customized Cash Rewards card, and that came back with an approval of $24,000. Then I applied for the Business Advantage Unlimited Cash Rewards card. That application went pending, but once that decision came back, it was approved for $19,000. Now, that's pretty normal with Bank of America. A lot of the times the first approval will come in a little bit higher and the second approval may come in slightly lower than the first one. Now, these were not massive approvals, but they still did add to my total. And that's what I want people to understand about funding sequences. Not every approval has to be $50,000. Sometimes one bank can give you a larger limit, another will give you a decent limit, and then you'll add the final few $1,000s that you need to hit your funding goal. Now, I did get 2 hard inquiries with TransUnion when I got this credit card. And then again, when I was done with my applications, I did submit a request to remove those, and those inquiries have come off of my TransUnion credit report. Now, let's break down the final numbers. The Lightstream loan was $30,000. Again, not 0% APR business credit. It was still part of the overall funding strategy because it did help me create liquidity, and it also strengthened the banking relationships. Then Chase approved me for $45,000 in total business credit. US Bank approved me for $23,000, and Bank of America approved me for $43,000. Altogether, the total funding came out to $141,000, with $111,000 of that being 0% APR business credit. That is a major result, especially considering this started with an LLC that was basically dead before the strategy began. The reason this worked was because the profile was positioned correctly. I did not rely on a brand new LLC as the main funding vehicle. I brought the existing LLC back into good standing. I opened business accounts with the banks that I planned to apply with. I deposited real money into those accounts, and I waited before submitting my applications. And that will always matter because, once again, banks are relationship driven. And what I mean by that is they look at how much money you leave in the bank because they do something called fractional bank lending, where they can lend out money based off of what you leave in the bank with them. So in this case, it would behoove them to then lend out more lines of credit. So hopefully you can make more money and leave more money in their bank so they can lend more money and make money off of interest. So just understand how this system works. They want to see deposits, they want to see activity, they want to see consistency, and they want a business that looks structured before they extend you credit. Now, I always want to be transparent with you, so let me explain what I would have done differently. The main mistake I made was applying for US Bank too soon. I had recently been approved for another US Bank product, and I believe that likely influenced my limits on these new approvals. Now, if US Bank had approved me for something like $40,000 by itself, then this funding round could have reached around $150,000 in 0% APR. So even though the final results were still strong, I do believe I left some money on the table. And that is why I always say a funding strategy is not just about knowing which banks approve business credit cards. It's about knowing the order. It's about understanding the underwriting, knowing which banks are connected, knowing when to apply online, knowing when to use a relationship manager, and also understanding how one approval can affect the next one. But always remember, getting the funding is only part of the process. You also need to use the funding correctly. You need to understand when the 0% APR period ends, what the minimum payments are, and how to avoid maxing everything out irresponsibly. You need a plan to either pay the balances down, move the balances, invest the funds into something productive, or refinance into a better product before the promotional period ends. Because getting approved is powerful, but managing the funds correctly is what determines whether or not the strategy actually helps you build wealth or just creates some other debt problem. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. When you understand how to position your business entity, when you understand how to build banking relationships and how to apply in the correct order and how to handle pending applications, you give yourself a much better chance of getting real high limit approvals. And remember, the goal is not just to get approved. The goal is to get approved with higher limits while keeping your profile clean enough to keep funding again in the future. So before you apply for business credit, make sure you're not leaving money on the table. Make sure you're using the strongest entity that you have available at your disposal. Make sure that your business is active, it's in good standing, and of course your personal credit profile is prepared. Because when you do this the right way, one funding round can completely change the amount of capital that you have available for your business. If you found value in this video, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to keep breaking down real strategies, real approvals, and real mistakes, as well as real data points that can help you understand how to build business credit and how to access funding the right way. And as always, I truly appreciate you guys for watching this video, and you have a wonderful day.